The objective of this video is to describe the topics covered in the Debian Administrator Handbook. So in the last video we stopped at the patch section. It says that a patch is a file describing changes to be made to one or more reference files. I feel like this is a little tricky. It's not just describing changes, it's doing the changes. They said that specifically it will contain a list of lines to be removed. Okay, so there's some action. And or after those lines are removed, we'll be adding to the code. So again, not describing changes, but literally inserting new code. Now the tool they use for applying these modifications is a tool just called patch, I guess. And the tool that creates the change is called diff. So here's what you would type into the command line: diff tac u file old file new, and then you got the little alligator eating the new one right here. So eat that new file to get healthy, and we're going to put it into file.patch. Now the file.patch file contains the instructions for changing the content of file old into file new, and we can send it to someone who can then use it to recreate file.new from the two others like this. So there's that tool patch. You type in tac p0 file.old, and then eat that file.patch you created so that, again, the operating system or program that you're patching is nice and healthy. So that was a really big learning curve when I just started learning about computer science. The idea that everything is in a folder and everything is a file, and these files work together, and if the files are in the same folder, they work together. Once you're doing a lot of stuff on the command line, I think this will become second nature to you, especially if you're using the command line in an operating system such as Debian. Now the programs Debian comes with by default, there are quite a bit of them. And these are really important, and these are what make a particular Linux distro pretty famous sometimes. Here we have something called a DPKG, and it's the Debian Packet Management Program. There you go, D, package. apt is another tool to automatically install any Debian package and its dependencies, guaranteeing the consistency of the system after an upgrade, and so thus its name is an acronym for Advanced Package Tool. So sometimes these are just straight up acronyms like this one, and sometimes they are just like weird consonants picked out of a particular word. So apt is the big one I'd suggest you remember. So as a check for understanding, just tell me what apt is doing. Many of you may be used to seeing apt get. It says that apt is a second command line based front end, so I'm not used to seeing like front end used in the context of command line stuff, but basically apt overcomes some of the design mistakes that apt get had. So apt is the good one to use, and lucky for us, it's relatively short to type. So if a normie ever asks you if you use apt-get or apt, you can answer apt and know why. Well, if you really want to be fancy, you should go out and experiment the difference between when you use apt and when you use apt-get. To do so, you'll probably need some suggestions on programs to download, so I'll go into that in the next video. And so by the time you get to page 63 in this handbook, they drop a pretty cool scenario on you. So that's a great way to learn, I think, is to imagine you are in the shoes of somebody who's actually using this Debian operating system. It reads, in the context of this book, you are the system administrator of a growing small business. The time has come for you to redefine the information systems. Here you go. My particular title of CIS instructor stands for Computer Information Systems. So you're going to redefine the information systems master plan for the coming year in collaboration with your directors. You choose to progressively migrate to Debian, both for practical and economical reasons. If I was you, I would emphasize that we want to be like the International Space Station. Okay, I'm just kidding, but let's see in more detail what is in store for you. So you're going to switch on this whole Linux kernel at your place of work. You know, to make the scenario even more engaging, it would be helpful if you've already installed Debian on your own computer. And to give you a general overview of chapter 2 and 3, it's all about preparing for this whole migration idea. There's some real like advertisement kind of thing in terms of like they're just really trying to sell you on Debian, like Debian's the place to be. And they'll give you some good things to say to your boss and coworkers to get them to buy into using this Debian operating system to justify the whole idea of this migration. And maybe one of the biggest points that they make is the idea that Debian just plays really nice with everyone, like all kinds of other operating systems, whether it's Apple or a Windows machine. One of their biggest marketing things is just that Debian is good for everything. Now, amidst all this convincing, I found this particular paragraph really interesting. They said that since Debian squeeze, it is possible to use Debian with a FreeBSD kernel. So not a Linux kernel, but you're using Debian on top of something that's not Linux. That really blew my mind. So Debian really seems to be its own thing in that sense. I know Netflix uses FreeBSD or OpenBSD, one of those two, but personally, I've just never heard of anyone using Debian that's not on a Linux kernel, but here it is. In the next paragraph, they go on to say that these architectures may be an appropriate choice for Falco company, like this is the pretend company they're creating in this scenario for you to be a system administrator of. And sure, one of the most convincing things you could say as a system administrator to your boss is that the kernel supports 3 different types of firewalls. Unless you want to take the route of explaining how great this is for a network attached storage system. And if you're going to take that route, you're probably going to want to use a ZFS file system. I don't have a lot of experience with ZFS, but I know the people who use it, or at least the ones I've seen on YouTube, they really love ZFS. These are people who are speaking at some of the Linux conferences I've seen. Well, we're already on chapter 3 now, and they're just continuing that scenario. The title of it is Analyzing the Existing Setup and Migrating. So now we get an opportunity to dig into the migration process. And if you're following along at home, we're on page 71 now. So Debian integrates very well in all types of existing environments and plays well with other operating systems. I said that it is important to read RFCs because eventually they talk about how compliance with standards allows administrators to switch out programs, that is clients or servers, whether free or not. So a basis to this statement of Debian playing well is because the duocracy people, those who are contributing, they read their RFCs. And I have quite a few videos on RFCs. Just a quick fun fact for you that there are over 7,500 of them. And of all of those, only 80 of them are actually standards. So that shouldn't be too daunting of a task to make sure you are complying with the standards that the techie guys have agreed to. Who I'm referring to is really just the IETF. I think they're the ones primarily involved in standardizing a lot of these things that we're talking about. The book eventually talks about Samba, which threw me for a loop because I didn't know very much. It says that the latest version of Samba can replace most of the Windows features from those of a simple Windows NT server, authentication files, print queues, downloading, etc., to the most advanced one, which is a domain controller compatible with Active Directory. So after a little digging, it looks like Samba is a server. And if we go back, that makes sense because it's saying authentication files, print queues, downloading drivers. Well, that one's a little weaker, but the point is that's what a server does, is it serves up files or it serves up the ability to print. So if your operating machine is using Samba, it's allowing Linux and Windows to work together perfectly. Alright, so after the handbook talks about Windows, it'll talk about Apple OS X machines provide and are able to use the network services such as file servers and print sharing. These services are published on the local network, which allows other machines to discover them and make use of them without any manual configuration using Bonjour implementation of the ZeroConf protocol suite. So I had never heard of this, but the idea of service discovery is not new to me. I think a picture like this might help you guys out the very most. You can have a server or several servers, or really a server, just one box with different virtual environments that can then offer up different things like a licensing service or an event monitoring service. Ooh, authentication down here is probably a big one. So in order for this to work, you need some program to discover where that service is that it's looking for. And if for whatever reason you don't like this Bonjour program, you can use Avahi. So Debian includes another implementation, and apparently Avahi is just the same thing as Bonjour because it says it has the same functionality. So speaking of service discovery and servers, I mean console is another program that does this, and I'm talking about console just because I found the cool comic here. These comics are so terrific. You can go to the website right here if you want to see more of them. But imagine you got a bunch of servers, so you got your purple and yellow and red guys here. You have a load balancer like HA proxy, and then you have a program like console. This is a service discovery system. And then, of course, your DNS server. So what console does is these guys say, hi, I am a server and I am ready to go. And these guys in red, they're like, no request for me. My service is down right now, so you have to go somewhere else. What the console template does is it says, here's the new list of all the servers. So it takes who's ready and it creates it and puts it into this list. And then your load balancer, right, HA proxy. HA proxy here takes that list along with the bad news, and when there's a request for whatever particular service, HA proxy with that list can say, okay, like here's the cool guys, here's the ones who are ready. And then within just 1 second, if somebody boom goes down, console will take that information and deliver it to HA proxy. The artist says health checks are amazing, and that is finding a service without HA proxy doing all the hard work. So that was a cool looking comic, but the Debian Administrator Handbook has some pretty cool pictures too. You know, a picture like this is just emphasizing that Debian communicates with other systems well. But let me share a little frustration with you. They talk in the book about implementing Apple Share Protocol as well as the required notification so that the servers can be auto-discovered by the OS X clients. Then they go on to say that older Mac OS networks, used a different protocol called Apple Talk. So here's the frustration. Apple Talk, Apple Share, these things are easy to mix up. And since we were talking about versioning earlier, I just thought I should say, let's just use some version number, guys, not two terms that are just so close. My job as a teacher is to try to make things as easy to remember as possible, but I'm going to need some help here. What's an easy, fun way to remember the difference between Apple Talk and Apple Share? Well, maybe if you remember the extent that Apple Talk went to, they had like their own kind of OSI model going on. And to make matters worse, Apple Share is right there on top of it. So what is it? The Debian Handbook talks about there's a different protocol, and yet that protocol suite includes this newer Apple Share protocol. It's just really confusing. So if you hit that part of the book, don't worry, you weren't the only one. If you have a better explanation for me, go ahead and leave that in the comments. I'd be very grateful for that. But okay, let's talk about one of my favorite tools ever, and that is Nmap. Well, if you didn't know, Nmap is a tool. It quickly identifies internet services hosted by a network-connected machine, and this doesn't even require someone to be logged in. You can just Nmap a box and it'll go ahead and tell you all kinds of information. In this picture from the handbook, they are apparently talking to a machine called Merwiz, but many times I've seen a person Nmap with a couple tacks like tac-sc for default scripts. What they'll do is Nmap and then type in the IP address like right here instead of the name. But what you see happening here is Nmap does a scan report and it'll tell you how many ports are closed, and then it'll give you some information about the ones that are open like this. Another cool command you can use is netstat, and if you type in netstat tupan, and I guess tupan is a drum. I just had never seen that until I read this book. But if you do that, this command will show the list of active or pending TCP sessions. So right away that sounded really helpful to me. And here we are back at the whole concept of identifying services offered on the network. So let's wrap this video up with one more command, the PSAUXW. They say that if the server is a Unix machine offering shell accounts to users, it is interesting to determine if the processes are executed in the background in the absence of their own user. The command, there it is very useful. It displays a list of all the processes with their user identity. By checking this information against the output of the who command, which gives a list of the logged in users, it is possible to identify rogue or undeclared servers or programs running in the background. And then we can go into cron tabs, but maybe another time. I just thought you cybersecurity minded people would particularly be interested in this command. So that's it for this video. Next time we'll go ahead and talk about what you're going to do right before you migrate. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.